That Podcast Thing presents Home Movie Club, originally recorded June 2017. Episode number 8, Foreshadowing!
Hello and welcome to Home Movie Club, the podcast in which we look at the top grossing movies of the past 70 odd years. This time we are looking at 1935's Mutiny on the Bounty, a film starring Clarke Gable and a lot of seamen. I am, as always, delighted to say that I am joined by Joe Carter.
You had to go there, didn't you? You had to go there.
Oh yes. Daisy Swaffer.
Hello. Yes, no bad puns over here.
And my darling wife, Sami Kelsch.
I am so looking forward to the number of semen jokes there are going to be in this podcast.
Oh, God.
Seaman Staines and Roger the Cabin Boy. Let's get them out of the way now, shall we?
Oh, man.
They're probably going to be more entertaining than the film was, though, to be fair.
Yeah.
As I said, we are looking at the top grossing movies of each year. However, top grossing doesn't necessarily mean most exciting or enjoyable.
It might have been the most exciting or enjoyable of 1935. I haven't watched any others from that year to judge.
Yeah.
I really feel sorry for the denizens of 1935 then. As you can probably tell, dear listeners, this film was not exactly popular. And actually it was also marks the first, because it was the first time we have all sat in the same room and watched the film together, which is a lifeline really, because it meant that we didn't just wander off and get bored halfway through.
Well,
we sat there and got bored
all
instead.
got bored,
We kept each other
Yes.
sane through it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It allowed
Yes.
us to persist to the end.
I didn't fall asleep this time.
Yeah.
The end, which seemed to take forever to reach.
Yeah.
How many times did we stop and look at how long was left on it?
God, I think I lost count after like a dozen.
By like 2/3 of the way through, I think about 17.
Yeah.
Yeah, easily.
So yeah, I mean, opening thoughts potentially a little bit moot, because this film, obviously we have kind of implied, didn't really float our boat, pun intended. But Joe, opening thoughts.
It took a really long time to get to the mutiny, and then when it got there, it was kind of disappointing.
Yeah, I know.
I feel like
Daisy?
I should make a sex joke there, but probably not.
Feel free not to. Daisy.
I feel like the one interesting thing in the entire movie was spoiled in the title of the movie, in the ultimate foreshadowing. Foreshadowing!
Yes, there was definitely
If we
foreshadowing
hadn't have
happening.
known there was going to be a mutiny, it might have been more interesting going, where is this going?
True, the title does kind of give it away a little bit. But I guess as it's based on historical documentation, but in reality, it's ridiculously unlike what actually happened in historical context.
Oh, really?
It's a film about a book that is about a vague possible thing that happened. Yes, there was a mutiny on the Bounty, but not for any of the reasons mentioned in this film.
God.
Yeah, no, this absolutely falls into the inspired by camp rather than the based on camp.
Oh
As
no,
far as
see, the
films
one
that
thing that
are
I felt...
supposedly informed
The
by
one
history.
thing that I felt had made it worthwhile actually watching this film was the fact that it was based on something that had happened, and now you're telling me that wasn't even the case.
Well, no,
Well, it
with
was
the
kind
Butch
of.
Cassidy, it was with Butch Cassidy, it was classed as most of what follows is true. With this film, I think it was some of what follows is true, but not necessarily how we tell it. It was a film based on a book as opposed to a film based on a historic event, and I think that's as good as you can say for it.
Yeah.
Sammy, any opening thoughts?
Opening thoughts. I literally have a webpage open at the moment that is just a list of films that came out in 1935, and I'm about 12 entries in, and I can already see 5 or 6 things that we probably would have rather watched
Oh dear.
than this one. So yeah.
So we can't even give it, well, maybe it was the actual best film of that year and it was just a bad year. Oh dear.
Yeah, no, sorry. I mean, the Marx Brothers, A Night at the Opera,
Ooh,
fun
yeah.
times, Top Hat.
Perhaps it just had
dancing,
a really,
fun
really big
times.
opening weekend, and that was it. So.
Bride of Frankenstein. Come on. Why this?
Yeah, I would have picked any of those over this.
Why this? And Bride of Frankenstein is only 75 minutes. If there's nothing else in its favor, it's under 2 hours.
Yep. And this film was definitely over 2 hours by quite a lot.
Not by quite 2 hours and 12 minutes. It just felt like about 3.5 hours.
Boy, did it ever. It needed an
like an
interval
entire
and-
day.
So yes, we start off with, as Daisy says, foreshadowing, which then told you quite a lot about what was going to happen in the film, which kind of took the edge off it, some of it. But yes, Portsmouth Harbour, England. Apparently it's December 1787. Preparations are being made to sail the HMS Bounty to Tahiti, where her crew are going to collect breadfruit trees.
What is breadfruit?
This is the first question we never really got answered, was what the heck is actually breadfruit?
It was just assumed that the audience knew this.
Yeah. I mean, it's
It is a highly starchy fruit product. It doesn't have a lot of taste. It's kind of potatoey, but it's got a lot of nutrients and carbs, so it's a good source of energy and general nutrition. And it grows well in this climate, so.
Yeah, the whole point was it is a cheap food source for basically the slave camps in the West Indies.
Yeah.
Although there were other breadfruit missions that went more successfully than this one, and breadfruit was actually successfully imported into the West Indies, and no one liked it, so they didn't really eat it anyway.
Oh, God.
So.
Yeah, surprisingly, it's kind of gross.
So we start off with a typical English Portsmouth activity, which is some press ganging. So Fletcher Christian, who is ship's lieutenant, basically rounds up several seamen from the local pubs in order for them to go into the Navy for a 2-year voyage.
That was really awful. Like, it was a horrible way to start the movie.
Yeah. Well, first
No,
death.
but unfortunately that was one of the more historically accurate parts of it,
Yeah.
because that did obviously happen. And these people were in pubs in Portsmouth by the docks. You know, these were proper seamen.
But the poor guy, he'd only just had a kid, and
Yep.
his wife was pleading for them not to take him.
Yep, so they take on these men. All men. There was actually more women in this film than we originally expected, but not by much. These men are taken and put to go aboard the ship. One of them asks who the captain is, and it's pointed out that it's Captain Bligh, in which case he panics and tries to run away, but is detained.
Foreshadowing!
Foreshadowing! And then we get a slightly different scene where we get Roger the cabin boy. No, Roger Byam, who is apparently a descendant of a long line of officers, is being made a midshipman on the Bounty. Basically commissioned to help Sir Joseph Banks to help him research his Tahitian dictionary. Which is weird, because everybody in Tahiti seems to speak English, but we'll get to that shortly.
His family's been in the Navy for 7 generations, don't you know?
Yes, he is a descendant of a long line of decorated naval officers. As the ship is about to set sail, one of the press-ganged sailors, Thomas Ellison, basically doesn't want to leave because he has a wife and very newborn child, tries to break ship. However, Christian learns of the attempt and uses reason to keep him on the ship, basically showing that Fletcher Christian is a good guy.
The film wants to give us the impression that Fletcher Christian is a good guy, yet he does a whole bunch of stuff that just makes him seem like a jerk.
I think he's a good guy in comparison to the captain. So on a scale of the captain to average reasonable human being, he's on the better side of that.
Yes.
Yeah, so he's not a complete lunatic. Yeah. That's...
So, you know, in setting, he's a good guy.
And that's the other thing, doing some research into this for this podcast, I found out that actually Captain Bligh was actually one of the better officers in the Royal Navy.
Really?
In real life, not in this.
charming.
And in real life, he was not prone to flogging. He was actually against it. He was strict, and he demanded loyalty, but he was not the sort of captain as portrayed in this film. He knew the importance of nutrition. He knew that a happy ship was a better ship. So really, you know, this character is not the real William Bligh.
Yeah. They've maligned his character, and they've made the guy at the end, spoilers, basically him, haven't they? Was that Roger?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yes, they board the ship, and Captain Bligh orders his crew to witness what is called a flogging through the fleet. where basically a court-martialed seaman is flogged in front of every ship in the fleet. Now, this seaman apparently was caught punching his captain, which is
Foreshadowing!
not foreshadowing, but not a great career move. The Master at Arms pronounces that the court-martialed seaman is actually dead, but Bligh insists that they proceed with the flogging.
So this is the first death.
Creepy.
Not so much flogging a dead horse as flogging a dead seaman.
A dead person, yep. We go through this, we get lots of scenes of Captain Bligh being no dissent from his crew and not hearing any negatives coming from anybody. So we get that. We finally get to see. Hurrah! It only begins here. Roger the midshipman is severely punished, apparently, for having a minor fistfight with one of the other officers. And he is forced to stand perched on top of the masthead during the storm. Just, again, to show what an absolute
Like, he nearly dies
psychotic.
up there. It was
Yeah,
pretty
I mean,
horrific.
there's absolutely no empathy from the captain at all.
Yeah, and then when they rescued him, when he'd really been up there far too long, the captain tells them to put him back.
And bearing in mind this, although he is just a midshipman, is the son of a sir and is being sponsored by another sir. So, he is reasonably well connected in what was at that time very important English society. But yeah, so he gets sent up to the top of the mast, he lashes himself up there, he basically nearly dies. Christian tries to end it, brings him back down, but Bligh just sends him back up again. Because Bligh is... I was going to say Bligh is a word that I can't say in this podcast because it's family friendly.
All right, then.
Captain Bligh is a beep.
He is not a nice man. But it's another example of how we're meant to read Fletcher Christian as a good guy because he rescues dude from the top of the mast.
Later on, we see Bligh keel haul a sailor because he asked for water to treat a wound. Keel hauling basically being the act of tying two bits of rope to a sailor, one to each arm, and dragged prow to stern, or indeed from port to starboard. This almost inevitably kills the crewman.
I think it seemed like he died when he hit the water for some reason.
Yeah. Well, most seamen at that point can't sail, so... most seamen at that point can't swim, so...
Smart.
Yeah.
Nice.
I mean, the other thing being that actually keel hauling had been outlawed for many years at this point, and he would have never done that.
Yeah.
But again...
I mean, the thing is, for me, I understand the importance of having a well-disciplined crew. But on the other hand, if you're continually punishing people for absolutely anything and everything, even reasonable things, to the point that they all die, then you haven't really got much of a crew to work with, and then you're just like one grumpy captain having to do everything yourself, and that doesn't seem smart to me. So, what is wrong with you?
This is the main message of this film, is that this sort of event is what turned the Royal Navy from a bunch of sadistic killers into a nice, happy, touchy-feely establishment. Or, well, not quite, but, that kind of way. So, yeah, he kills one of his crew via keel-hauling him. He then accuses one of his crew of stealing cheese, even though the cheese was actually taken by one of the clerks to Bligh's house in Portsmouth. In other words, he's scheming as well. And that person is then, again, punished. So basically any dissent is followed by swift and brutal punishment.
Great.
But then Fletcher Christian kind of leads a bit of a mini rebellion over the officers against him for that, punishing that guy.
Yep.
In more foreshadowing.
Yep. It was like, is it going to be mutiny time? No, it's
They were
not.
just teasing us.
Yep.
They were. I mean, at this point, the captain has been built up to be such a despicable human being.
If they can walk, they can work, he says.
Yeah. They are building it up to the point that when the mutiny does finally happen, and we've got a way to go yet, sorry people, you almost agree with them. You are on the side of the mutineers.
Yeah.
You can certainly heavily empathise with them, if nothing else.
We now have a death count of 2.
It does build to a point where Christian basically accuses Bligh of starving his crew. Bligh forces Christian to sign the book of supplies that basically says that the crew have been given a lot more supplies than they actually have. Christian refuses, and then he's forced to do it in front of the whole ship's crew, although that gives Christian a platform to show that he's doing it under orders. Bligh then calls Christian a mutinous dog, but just as Christian is about to strike him, bum bum bum, Land is spotted on the horizon and the crew makes preparations for landing in Tahiti.
It was like, mutiny, mutiny, no, there's land.
No.
Island
And this is
Paradise,
50
it's
minutes
fine.
into the film. So yeah, 50 minutes in, they finally get to Tahiti. I mean, this is a year's voyage, so 50 minutes is probably nothing, but you know.
We've been getting a kind of Indiana Jones world map plotting of the route as well, which has been one of the actually more interesting things we've seen, but it's gone so quickly on those that I haven't really followed very well what
No, they took an
route they're
original
taking.
route down sort of one way and then had to cut across under the Cape of Good Hope, and yeah, their route wasn't the most direct.
The map was funny though when they showed that.
Yes, they did kind of show this section where suddenly it was going backwards and forwards all over the place, like a drunk bonobo chimp in charge of driving.
Aww.
So they get to Tahiti. Hurrah!
Yay! I thought they were going to mutiny before they got there, so I was quite disappointed when they got to Tahiti.
Once in Tahiti, Blythe is greeted by the island chief Hiti Hiti, who is an old friend of the King's Navy, and apparently greeted Captain Cook's ship when Bligh was sailing master on it 10 years earlier. Following a polite exchange of salutation, Bligh puts his crew working to harvesting the breadfruit trees, thus denying all of the Tahitians any food, and they all die. No, not really.
And the Tahitians mutiny. No.
No, unfortunately not. And it's when they got to Tahiti, they did have a scene where all of the kayaks and canoes from the island sort of swarmed over to the ship and, you know, just poured onto the deck. And that's really not great security on the point of the Royal Navy
It
there.
looked a bit more like Navy propaganda anyway. Like, that didn't seem very likely to me. Would they really be that excited?
I'm sure the Tahitians are perfectly happy living their lives without the assistance of the
Yeah.
British, which is what it kind of gave the impression of. Kind of gave the impression that they were really glad to see this ship, even though, whatever. Punishment for being a mutinous dog, Bligh denies Christian shore leave.
Boo.
However, for some unknown reason, because he's not actually ever met him, the
Foreshadowing!
island's chief, Hiti Hiti, manages to secure his freedom, then introduces the lieutenant to his granddaughter.
Yes.
His granddaughter, May Mitty, who I found out earlier today, Microsoft Word wants to change to Marmite.
Aww.
Christian falls in love with Marmite. No, he doesn't. Christian falls in love with Maya Mitty, even though they only see each other for a few weeks. And before he leaves Tahiti, he instructs Byam, who can speak the local language, even though quite a lot of them speak English anyway, to tell her that he will come back for her someday.
Foreshadowing!
This is, yeah. So, several months pass on the island. I think it's kind of assumed that they are there for more than just 10 minutes.
They're there long enough to fall in love.
Yeah. So they go off, they go back to sea. Bligh orders the flogging of 4 seamen who attempted to desert and stay on the island. And for a reason I don't quite understand, he insists that the ship's surgeon, who is clearly an old man and clearly unwell, as sort of been seen in previous scenes, I think he's got a wooden leg almost. He insists that the surgeon witnesses the punishment, and in doing so, the brutality proves too much to the physician and he collapses and dies. I don't think the brutality is specifically, more just the fact that he had to get up and make his way up ship while he was very unwell.
He was pretty much dying in bed as it was. That was
He would have
the
been
last
dead
thing
fairly
that
soon,
finished
Yeah,
him
let's
off.
be real.
Yeah. However, Christian blames Bligh for the doctor's death and decides to put an end to Bligh's
Finally!
ruthless tyranny
And-
by leading a
Is
crew
it
to mutiny.
Is it mutiny? Is it mutiny?
It's mutiny!
It's mutiny at last!
Finally!
1 hour, 27 minutes into this film, with exactly 45 minutes to go, there is, at last, a mutiny on the
Which I
Bounty.
thought was going to be the rest of the film at that point.
But no, it was
No.
a disappointing
No.
5-minute mutiny.
Yeah, so Christian takes control of the ship, forcing Bligh and his allies onto the ship's launch and casting them out to sea.
And I thought at least the whole ship was going to mutiny, but it wasn't that many of them really that actually did.
No, and I don't think there was that many on the ship to start with, because it was a fairly small ship.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Christian takes control of the ship. He puts the non-mutineering crew, which is quite a few men, into this launch, and
Well, there's many of them that'll fit. Not all of the non-mutineering
No.
ones fit in.
there are a few non-mutineering seamen who are locked up in cabins and under the decks. But they refuse to kill the non-mutineering crew. They refuse to kill the loyal crew. I think, again, to show that Christian is the good guy, or at least not a cold-blooded murderer. Because, frankly, killing them would have saved them a lot of trouble in the long run. But that would have made him the bad guy, and I guess that's why they didn't want to do that.
Yep.
So yes, they cast them out to sea with little more than some rations and some basic navigation equipment, assuming that they'll all die fairly quickly, which is probably a fairly safe assumption.
Technically not killing them, but they're assuming that they're killing them.
Yes, they're not killing them, but they are leaving them to the mercy of the sea, which is pretty much the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the first thing Christian does when he gets control of the ship? That's right, he goes straight back to Tahiti, where he marries his other half.
Yay!
This really did feel like surely it should have been like a group decision, and that perhaps the rest of them might have wanted to go back home, but he just kind of went, no, this is what we're doing. I'm the captain now.
Well, I think the idea, but if you've started mutinying, you ain't going back home, because if you do, you're going to get hung.
Yeah.
And actually, I think, as you said earlier, I think the reason for the mutiny is slightly unclear in history, but the general consensus is that actually the reason that a lot of the people who did mutinied was because they wanted to stay in Tahiti, because it was pretty much a paradise.
Probably a lot nicer than back home.
They did spend an
time.
awful lot of time on Tahiti in order to show us that that's a really nice place. See why they'd want to go back there.
It was seen as, I mean, even it sort of, in the film, even that in the film was shown, but in real life, I think the whole point was that they did not want to go back to sea because, frankly, Tahiti was a lot better. There was a lot more women, a lot more sunshine, a lot more, good times to be had. A lot more milk in coconuts, even though coconuts don't actually have milk, apparently they were milking coconuts.
Is a thing. It's the liquid inside.
Yes, but that's made from the coconut milk is actually made from the pulp of the coconut, not the actual liquid
so
inside.
Coconut water is what's
That's
on
the water
inside.
inside the coconut. That's the stuff that you can get for fairly expensive at Waitrose now, in like cartons and stuff. And to me, it tastes like the milk that's left over after you've eaten a bowl of Shreddies.
I have done neither of those things.
I'm not a fan of coconuts,
but it is an amazing source of electrolytes, so it's really good for, those very hot days when you're dehydrated, which is probably useful on an island paradise, so hey,
But if you drink too much of the coconut water, it does give you diarrhea, so, don't do that.
Yeah.
The saddest thing about the mutiny to me was the fact that Fletcher and Roger fell out about it when they'd been like a bromance until that point. We
they had built that up as a bit of a
them, and Roger was like, well, now we can never be friends, and I was just heartbroken.
I know, it was so much of a bromance, it was almost a romance.
Yeah.
There was one bit where they were talking and they were really, really close to each other, and honestly, if this had been a different movie, I would have expected them to kiss.
Yes.
Yeah. So they go back to Tahiti, and the non-mutineering loyal seamen are abandoned on the island, although they have a reasonable amount of freedom, but they keep themselves away from the mutinous dogs. For some reason, and this is historically accurate, and there are apparently books that are very interesting about it, Bligh and the crew in the launch do actually make it to land and are rescued.
Without Bligh somehow flogging them all to death on the way.
Yeah, he was actually quite nice to everybody.
Yeah.
I would have thought he would have shoved some people overboard just to get more rations.
Yeah. Yeah, because those Russians were not going to, surely last them. I
was actually really impressed with him. I mean, he was less of a dickhead.
It's one of those slight dichotomies of this film is that he actually is shown to be a reasonable human being, but when he's doing his job as captain, that's kind of what was expected as the captain of a ship.
It's just weird.
And as I said, in real life, he was nowhere near as vicious and brutal as is
it was just weird because it was
film.
A complete opposite of how he was on the ship. And I'm impressed that they managed to make it without anybody dying, because
I think the problem is that they have this real fixed thing that happened, which is they had these certain number of people on the ship and they got put into the launch and they made their way to, I don't actually know where they landed.
Sydney?
No, they got somewhere and then from there got to the port of Sydney and then from there back to
Okay, but
England.
I got Sydney, right?
Yes.
That must have been a long trip back for them.
Yep.
Yeah.
And at this point, Captain Blythe was a little obsessed, wasn't he?
Yeah. Understandably.
So yes, they get back to civilization, they go back to England, and Captain Bligh leads the Pandora, which is a second British ship, back down to the Tahitian Islands in an attempt to capture and bring the mutineers to justice. So we have a situation where they see the Pandora on the horizon, so the bounty crew and also quite a few of the local Tahitians, so wives, children, because this is several years later and it takes a year to get there, a year to get back. They would have settled in quite well. Basically, they sail off to run away from the incoming ship.
Run away!
So the Pandora lands in Tahiti carrying Bligh, who quickly arrests Roger and the others for mutiny despite their sworn loyalty.
But before Roger goes to the ship to report for duty, he tells his Tahitian wife that he'll be back in 2 hours. Yes. Foreshadowing!
And he was never seen again.
Yeah.
They also find and arrest 3 seamen who did mutiny but wanted to try and hide on the island. Because they wanted to stay in Tahiti.
One of them wanted to go back and see his wife and kid.
Yes, sorry, you're right. Yes, 2 of them wanted to hide. And Ellison, who was the one with the child and wife.
Oh, is that his name?
London.
I always, in all my notes, I've written him as wife and kid bloke.
Wife and kid bloke, although accurate, is actually called Thomas Ellison.
Not
Thomas Edison, no.
That's a different one.
So yes, they're all arrested and thrown in irons underneath the deck.
Until I got Roger's name, he was down in my notes as young posh bloke.
Yeah, but there were a bunch of young
posh
bloke
bloke called Roger.
Fletcher Christian was just Clarke Gable for most of my notes.
Yeah, this is one of the problems with this film is a lot of these people were wearing uniforms and they're all obviously white men and they're quite.
They all look the same.
And the ones that didn't look the same or ones that had distinct characteristics were very stereotypical characteristics. Yeah. So there was the coward who kept running around and being comic relief, although comic relief is a very sort of
a generous term.
Loose term. Yes, very
here.
generous.
Yeah.
So they arrest the mutineers and turn to try and catch the bounty. However, they run into heavy seas, break up on a reef. Bligh, who insists the bounty's incarcerated crew must also be rescued to face justice. Again, he is very insistent that they get the chained crew out of the holds and into the launches.
Yeah, I was really surprised by that then.
Partially, I guess, because they must face justice in London to justify his second trip down there. But also because he's actually not quite the vicious that is made out to be in a lot of this film.
The bit
although in real life
they were all marooned, and then that bit, it was like, based on the beginning of the film, this is completely out of character. But you know, if it's based on the actual person, it was completely in character. So
yeah, although in the actual real life situation, apparently 4 men did drown when the boat was sunk.
Well, someone died on the way back, didn't they? One of the other mutineers. No, one of the people that didn't mutineer. Roger's friends.
Yeah, one of Roger's friends. So yes, they somehow managed to make their way from the crashed ship to Australia and then again back to England.
We just cut from them making it off this sinking ship in lifeboats to the court-martial proceedings in England. So it's like, I guess they made it then.
Yes, so
considering how big blocks of text they've not been shy about giving us on the screen in this film, that cut felt very jarring.
Well, especially as it took like an hour and a half or whatever to get to any kind of actual content.
Yeah, I was glad for them to kind of speed up these bits. Yeah.
Yeah. Prisoners complain they're being kept from their families, including Ellison, who has not seen his wife and child for 3 years. However, back on the other side of the world...
Meanwhile, back in the ranch.
Knowing it will not be safe in Tahiti, Christian sails the bounty to Pitcairn Island. As there's no anchorage suitable for landing, they basically just full sail ahead, which sounds wrong, into the beaches of the island, breaking the ship and making it so that they are not able to leave again. They salvage any usable parts from the stricken ship and set fire to it, going, oh, it's burning well.
You'd think they could, like, make huts out of that wood or something, but no.
Well, this is the thing, is, I mean, also, but how much tools and equipment did they have to break a ship like that down? I think they salvaged what they could and then just set fire to it. The logic being that if you have a wrecked ship with its masts in the air, that's going to stick out from further distance, and any crew looking for them will see that.
Where is Pitcairn Island?
It's British territory.
I just pulled it up on Google Maps, and I see a dot against a field of blue.
It looks to be about equidistant between New Zealand and Chile.
It is literally in the middle of absolute diddly squat. Is what we're saying.
middle of absolute diddly squat. Just slightly north of the tip of New Zealand.
They kind of did well managing to find that then, didn't they?
That was
Yeah.
quite lucky. Yep.
So they find Pitcairn Island, they scuttle the ship, they burn it, and they set off to...
Were they the ones to name it, the island?
No, I don't think so. I think it was already... This is the other thing, is they actually did have charts, and they would have known it was there, so it wasn't that lucky to
Okay,
find it.
so they were probably aiming for it, and they were lucky
Yeah.
in managing to hit it.
So yes, they scuttle the ship, and they begin their life anew on Pitcairn Island.
How does anyone know that?
Because there's still
Were
people
there not
living
people
there.
living there before?
No.
Oh, so they actually settled the island.
They settled the
it.
island.
If anybody still lives on the island, and I couldn't work out whether they did or not, because the last thing I could find was 2004. There was like 59 people living there, and there was talk of them all moving off. They were all pretty much descendants of the mutineers.
That's really cool.
They should have called it Mutineer Island or something then.
Yeah,
I feel like that warrants a name change of the island, you know?
possibly. Perhaps they called it something else themselves
Yeah.
anyway. So
Safe haven.
Rogersville or something. So we get the situation where Roger is convicted of high treason. In fact, they're all convicted of high treason, yet only 3 of them hang, which are the 3 mutinous seamen who actually admitted to their crimes, including, unfortunately, young Ellison.
Well, he did actually mutiny, so that was fair.
He did mutiny, and he got to see his wife and child before
He was
the
really
end.
happy about that. Like, he at first, when he was so happy, I thought somehow he'd managed to get a pardon for it or something. But no, he was just that happy to briefly see them before he was hanged.
So sad.
Yep.
It was really weird that they were all sentenced together. That was...
It was a very odd ending in many ways,
Yeah.
because apparently it was like 5 years between Roger Byam being convicted and then being, spoilers, given clemency
He was pardoned
and
by the king.
Returned back to the fold.
Oh wow, I totally
He was
missed
pardoned by the
that.
king. But apparently, well, I missed it as well. This is
Yeah,
just
I
from
missed
reading up on it. It's 5 years apparently.
I thought it was like 20 minutes.
Were they in prison for
Yeah.
5 years, or did they just hang the others and not hang him and keep him in prison? Because I thought they were all to hang.
This is what I don't understand either. It wasn't really very clear. The other thing to remember, he is the son of a Sir, so he's the son of Sir Austin Byam, and was being sponsored by Sir Joseph Banks, who made his name on Cook's ship the Endeavour.
So basically, if you're a certain level of class, then you don't
Yeah.
get hanged, you just get imprisoned instead.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Bearing in mind that Sir Joseph Banks was on the Endeavour, as was Captain Bligh, there was probably a little bit of backroom stuff happening there.
Yeah.
And also, he was one of the main sponsors of the Bounty's mission to get breadfruit as well. So.
Oh, that breadfruit never made it home, though, did
They
it?
went for a
Well,
swim.
not that. No, they went for a swim. So yes, in the film, Roger is restored to the Royal Navy, assigned to its flagship, no less, and set to fight the French in the Battle of Trafalgar.
So I wrote at the end of this, the moral of the story is to kill the people that you mutiny against.
Yep, because
Yeah.
it's not going to get any worse.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's either the moral of the story is either kill the people you mutiny against, although that does make you the bad guys,
But then
in
at
many
home
ways you
they'll
are
probably
anyway.
assume that the ship wrecked, so
Yeah.
that's all fine.
Or be the son of a knight of the realm, so be a son of a sir, be sponsored by another sir, and come from a long line of decorated seamen. That's
if
the
you're
other
not
way
in
of
that
doing it,
position,
obviously.
kill the people you mutiny
But he
against.
didn't mutiny, so
Yeah.
it was fair that he got off, to be perfectly honest.
This is true.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
was actually innocent. And apparently it was the only people hung were the ones that were admitted mutineers, and the rest of them did get away
So what
with
was the
it.
total death count in the end?
Oh yeah, we need a death count.
I haven't worked one out because that would involve watching the film again. I mean, the other thing with this is that, as I said, it really does veer away from what actually happened. Things like the fact that when the Pandora goes into the Tahitian Islands to get sort of Bligh to arrest all of the mutineers, Bligh was nowhere near that ship. He never went on that ship. He was actually on a second breadfruit mission at that time and was off doing something completely different.
Oh god.
And the reason that a lot of the people who were tried for mutiny and actually got off was because Captain Bligh put in good words for them because he knew they were innocent. Yet none of that was shown in the film at all.
Oh, it's not dramatic or something.
It doesn't
No.
make as good a story.
Yep.
No. It kind of in the film it was sort of shown that Bligh was shunned by the Navy and never went on to do anything else. Yet in real life he became quite highly decorated, became Rear Admiral of the Navy, and actually Vice Admiral, I think, and also was Governor of New South Wales for a long while. So, you know, again, none of that kind of touched on.
Oh, well, that's historical accuracy for you.
That is historical accuracy versus... I was about to say that's historical accuracy versus telling a good story, but
No,
then I
it was
realised what I
really
was
not
saying
a good
about this
Telling
film.
a story. Telling a story.
A story. Yes, so Mutiny on the Bounty, I think it's fair to say this is the first one of these films we've done where, frankly, it was a bit of a...
I think it's the first one where we've all agreed
That it was
on
a
our opinion of
terrible
the film.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we have had ones in the past where some of us have liked and some of us hasn't, but this one was consistently thumbs down from all of us.
The only good thing about it was that I got to watch it with you all.
Yeah,
Yes,
I'm so
that
glad
was
we didn't
nice.
have to do that on our own.
Yeah.
Like, that was so much better as a group to get ourselves through it.
Group suffering as opposed to
Yes.
individual suffering.
I just wish that, you know, actually being able to be in the same room together, we didn't have something more fun that we got to watch. Because that would have been more fun.
Yeah.
As opposed to just suffering.
But I feel like the
Long,
emotional support
endless.
through this was more important than the enjoyment of a different one.
So yes, dear listeners, that was Mutiny on the Bounty. Possibly not the best film on the list.
Do not recommend.
Yeah, don't bother watching
Could not
it.
recommend this film.
It's terrible.
A lot of these films, we like to come out and say, you may well enjoy this film. Unfortunately, this one, no. I'm sorry. So yes, a film that is based on a book that's not really based on historical accuracy, that's turned into a film that is not that enjoyable. Thankfully, that is Mutiny on the Bounty. So all done and dusted.
Yay!
Final thoughts on 1935's Mutiny on the Bounty. Joe?
I can now delete that 2 hours and 12 minutes from my brain and never have to think about it again.
Yeah, me too. Daisy?
I'd like to think of a film like this in our journey through the highest grossing movies being there just to make us appreciate how much better the other ones are on the list.
Yes, it certainly does that with some of them. Sammy?
You know, I have to say that in spite of everything, I really enjoyed the parts of this film that I napped through.
And yes, final thoughts from me is along the lines of, oh, thank you, it's over.
I think we did
end.
cheer when it ended, didn't we?
We did indeed.
did.
When the title came up that said, the end, there was definitely
Yeah.
a cheer. Which says a lot about this film. Thankfully, that is the Mutiny done and dusted, and next time we will have a slightly more upbeat, well, in fact, very much more upbeat film in the form of 1950s Cinderella, the Disney animated classic. So that'll be in 2 weeks' time. We all look forward to that. Certainly more than we look forward to Mutiny on the Bounty. So, next time it's Cinderella. But for now, I'd like to thank you all for listening, and I can only apologise if you ever watch this film. But it's goodbye from me, it's goodbye from Joe,
Bye-bye.
it's goodbye from Daisy,
Goodbye.
and it's goodbye from Sammy.
I'm gonna go take another nap.
Goodbye, everybody. Bye.
Bye!
Thank you for listening to Home Movie Club, part of the That Podcast Thing network. Find us on Twitter at podcast_thing and on Facebook by searching for That Podcast Thing. Please like and subscribe for news of our future episodes coming soon.